The standard history of New Zealand presents a relatively young, neatly mapped territory. It is a story that begins with Polynesian navigators a few centuries ago, followed by European settlers who arrived to find what they assumed was a pristine, empty wilderness. That surface narrative rests on a far more ancient foundation. 85 million years ago, a massive landmass fractured away from the supercontinent of Gondwana and slowly vanished beneath the Pacific. This map shows the true scale of the eighth continent, Zealandia. It spans nearly 5 million square kilometers, meaning the islands we know today are merely the highest mountain peaks of a drowned world. Because the physical foundation of the country is largely hidden beneath 2 kilometers of water, the official timeline of life and history here remains incomplete. The missing records are often found underground. In the isolated limestone caves of the South Island, the stable, dry environment acts as a biological vault, preserving specimens for thousands of years. In 1986, explorers in the Owen Valley discovered a 3,000-year-old giant moa claw. The preservation was so effective that the specimens still possessed intact flesh, scales, and ligaments. This towering skeletal structure belonged to the giant moa. Reaching heights of nearly 4 meters, these flightless birds thrived for millennia in an ecosystem entirely devoid of land-based mammalian predators. Their only threat came from above. The Haast's eagle was a 15-kilogram apex predator, 10 times the size of a modern eagle, possessing talons comparable to a tiger's. When the early Polynesian settlers arrived on the islands, the massive eagles viewed them as viable prey. These discoveries suggest a wilderness far older and more dangerous than the one recorded in early European journals. Moving above ground, the landscape is dominated by dense native forests and nearly impenetrable bush. This terrain conceals stone structures, challenging the accepted historical timeline. The Kaimanawa Wall is a prime example. While official reports describe it as a natural fracturing of volcanic rock, the joints appear so precise that researchers continue to debate if the blocks were deliberately shaped and stacked. Further north, the Waipoua Forest contains a complex of more than 2,000 distinct stacked stone formations, including terraces and water channels spanning hundreds of hectares. Following a major excavation in the 1980s, the lead archaeologist sent the records to the National Archives, restricting public access until 2063. That decades-long embargo has fueled theories regarding the Waitaha or Moriori peoples, early groups who may have constructed these megaliths long before the Polynesian migrations. The presence of restricted archives and unmapped stone fields suggests the history of human occupation contains layers that have been largely ignored. The evidence of forgotten inhabitants is also etched into the rock. Remote coastal cliffs and limestone overhangs contain hundreds of ancient paintings and petroglyphs. This panel shows the stylized charcoal drawings found at these sites. Their patterns deviate from traditional Polynesian art styles. Maori oral traditions noted a definitive break in cultural memory. Elders stated they did not know who painted the oldest of these images. These markings represent a presence in the landscape that the current historical record does not account for. If we move from the ancient surface stones to the modern skies, the unexplained phenomenon continues to defy our expectations. In 1909, long before commercial aviation reached the islands, a wave of sightings across the South Island described moving chandeliers and unidentified lights. The most documented encounter in the nation's history occurred in December 1978 over the Kaikōura Coast. Cargo pilots reported being tracked by massive pulsing orbs. A news crew on board managed to capture the objects on film. While official reports suggested reflections from fishing boats or planets, military air traffic controllers in Wellington recorded matching radar data, tracking solid objects moving in tandem. In 2010, the Defense Force released over 2,000 pages of declassified reports. These files contain decades of civilian and military testimony. The skies hold documented data that remains as unexplained as the ancient physical anomalies found in the deep earth. The vertical journey, from sunken continents and predators in the caves, to stone cities and radar-tracked anomalies, reveals a pattern of persistent mystery. Geographic isolation has turned these islands into a vault for the unexplained. A fully mapped landscape is not the same as a fully understood history. The existing records are simply one layer of a much older and more complex reality. Uncovering the truth requires looking at the margins of the textbooks, where the stones and the skies still have something to say.
I am glad that AI documentary educate, inform, and inspire people about real-world issues.